Welcome to Donuts, Design, and Debate, the podcast where we discuss and you decide how many coveted donuts a particular design receives. I'm Matt Robison, and what are we debating today, Aaron?
Today, we're going to talk about brutalism. Now, before we jump into learning exactly what brutalism is, I'm going to give you a rundown of how this show is going to work. In just a second here, Matt's going to give us a history, kind of an idea of what the topic is, what all it covers, and then we're going to argue for or against it. One of us is going to argue pro, one of us is going to argue against, and we're going to take a couple minutes to just get our general arguments out there. Once we've done that, maybe gone back and forth a little bit, called each other names a couple times, then we're going to get into the voting. In the voting, we're going to lean on our live audience, the audience that's here with us recording live, to help us vote for or against brutalism as a design concept. These will be voted against our 5 design principles, which are: is the design useful? Does the design have aesthetic appeal? Is the design simple? Is the design environmentally friendly? And does this design feel honest? Every time that people vote up a principle, then this topic gets a donut. The whole success of a topic is judged by how many donuts out of 5 a topic gets. With that, let's learn a little bit about what brutalism is.
That's absolutely right. Thanks, Aaron. Sounds like an exciting format. I can't wait to get into it. Now let's talk about the history. Brutalism is an architectural style characterized by minimalist design and exposed raw building materials. Commonly, these materials are unpainted concrete or brick, simple geometric shapes, and monochromatic color are common in this style. It was popular from the early 1950s until about the late 1970s. And look, now it's not called brutalism because it's brutal. It's also not called that solely because of the French term béton brut, which is the first probably of many what's the word I'm thinking of here?
Misinformation? Or
it's not misinformation, but it's
conception?
I'm pronouncing it wrong. Mispronunciations. This is the word. Okay, we're getting into it here. Okay, so there's a lot of non-English words that I'm going to have to pronounce, and so that's the first of them. I'm just giving you a heads up. Anyways, béton brut in French means raw concrete, so some people, part of the reason it's brutalism is because of the brut from raw of that term. But there's more to go into on the origin. The origin of the term is a bit muddy, so I'll sort of just share everything that I found out with you and let you make up your own mind on where the term brutalism comes from and what defines it. So the term the new brutalism, this is capitalized, became well known in the UK in the early 1950s. In a November 1953 Journal of Architectural Design, architect Alison Smithson used the term the new brutalism to describe a plan for a house in Soho with exposed structure, no internal finishes, similar to what she said was similar to a small warehouse. Allison, along with her husband Peter Smithson, would go on to be the primary architects associated with brutalism. But like I said, this was the 50s, and so critics were very important to defining movements, not only in architecture, but art and film. And in 1955, architectural historian and critic Rainer Banham had an essay in the Architectural Review called The New Brutalism, and it became more well known because of that. He sort of tries to tie together a few loose ideas that were going around at the time about this concept. And here's a couple of things of what he mentions about it. The new brutalism, he says, was originally a negative term used by communists to make fun of academic modernism in the West. But he sees the new brutalism as an opposition to the communism that was going on at the time. He mentions Le Corbusier's béton brut, like I said, raw concrete, used to describe his unité d'habitation in Marseille, which had a lot of raw concrete in it. He also mentions art brut, which is just raw art, popularized by Jean Dubuffet. This is art that's not doesn't have like traditional schooling and stuff behind it, just more like kind of a raw outpouring of emotion kind of thing. But Banham definitely defined this new brutalism as something distinct and different with these three criteria that he had in mind. One, memorability as an image. An image as sort of the experience of the cohesive thing in itself. So that. Two, clear exhibition of structure. And three, valuation of materials as found. Yes, continuing on. After his article came out, there was a Swedish architect named Hans Asplund who says that he had used the term nybrutalism in Swedish to describe Villa Gut, spelled goth, in Sweden in 1950. Banham argues that this translation is actually closer to neo-brutalism, which would be sort of looking back and changing something that happened before, whereas the new brutalism is what he wants to say is something looking forward and distinct from what happened previously. Regardless of what this guy tries to define it as, there's a couple undeniable characteristics of what we today call brutalism. And we're getting towards the end of this. This is the least donut-y of the show. This is like just the info dump of knowledge, but it gives us good context. So thanks for bearing with us as we round out the history, talking about the characteristics of brutalism. So in the post-war period in the UK, there's a great need for utilitarian, low-cost public housing. And this style of strict modernistic design with not only reverence for materials, but also rejection of ornament or historic reference fit the bill for reconstruction at that time. The sense of strength and security that brutalism offered was welcomed by the people there. Other things that define brutalist architecture are leaving the pattern that was imprinted by the formwork in the design, whether that's wood or like some other kind of thing that's holding the concrete in place as it's poured. They don't like paint over that or put anything over that to cover it up. That's just like sort of outwardly part of the building itself. There's an emphasis on mass instead of volume, which was definitely a reaction to the international style that was popular before this, where that was more concerned with sort of sleekness and efficiency of construction. Brutalism is definitely about truth in materials, exposing the working of the buildings like conduits, ductwork, and water pipes. These are like exposed throughout the interior. It was a popular style for institutional buildings worldwide, so libraries, city halls, courts. In this late 50s, early 60s, many North American universities built brutalist buildings, not only for their low cost and ease of construction, but also perceived sort of transparency with like, look, this is what we are, this is what's going on in here. It's very clear that this material is what the building is made for. Very transparent, and also like the sort of the clout, the perceived sort of, this is a big institution. This is a thing that a big thing that should be reckoned with. Yeah. This style also became popular in the 60s and 70s in the Soviet Union, looking to sort of reject the past of Stalinism and embrace this idea of shared spaces that strove towards social utopia. So the offshoot of that style is now known as Soviet modernism, but you can see it borrows a lot of the same ideas as brutalism and looks very similar as well. After the 70s, worldwide, the energy shortage and economic conditions led to fewer of these public projects being built. And so because of the lack of upkeep, the brutalist buildings of the 50s began to be associated with urban decay and totalitarianism by some. That leads to today, where many brutalist buildings are still around. Brutalism is a contentious style. Some say that the unifying vision of bold materiality is impressive. That's true, I wrote this. Some others say that the structures are cold and drab, reflecting the ideals of a past time. But we are here today to let you settle the debate with your vote. Is brutalism good design? Thanks for bearing with us for that history. But we're going to get into the beautiful part of the show, which is the debate. So like Aaron mentioned before, we'll have a opening argument by the pro and then opening argument by the con. And as we do each and every episode, the pro goes first. We flipped the coin earlier to decide who was which side of this argument. Aaron is the pro, so he'll be debating first. So, Aaron, why don't you give me 5 minutes on why is brutalism good design?
Whew. All right. That was. I just first off, props on that history lesson. I think that's the most thorough we've ever had. So that was great.
Thank you for bearing with us.
All right. Let's talk about why brutalism is good design. And I'm not going to say why some people think it is. I'm just going to state it as fact. Brutalism is good design, all right? We'll just start there. Brutalism is like the epitome of what you need. It is a design that serves the function. Like Matt said, there's not a bunch of time and energy putting into finishing. There's not a bunch of concern or worry about decoration. It is what it is. It is a building. It is a structure. It is solid. It keeps the rain off you, keeps the people inside. That's all it does. I mean, it is what it is and nothing else. I think the biggest thing that happens with brutalism is it gets a bad rep, not because of what it is, but because of the way that it's positioned. If brutalism had a PR agent, it would probably need to be fired and find somebody else. Because I'm just go through a couple things here. So I mean, first and foremost, I just want to talk about architects. Okay, so architects, and this is not slinging mud. This is not talking bad about them, but architects are creatives. They are artists. What they make is functional artwork. They go to school for this. They take drawing classes. They look to creativity, look to influences outside of buildings to come up with ideas for buildings. And I think, and like I said, that's total, like I respect and like what architects do. I think that's one of the reasons that brutalism strikes a lot of people wrong, is we live in a world where architects are involved with the buildings around us, and a lot of the buildings that are created in a brutalist style don't necessarily tick the boxes for what a lot of architects want to see. There's not a whole lot of finish or flair that you see with a lot of architectural models. So I think it kind of gets a bad rep because it doesn't get that architectural finish, doesn't get that artistic finish that they want. It's just too simple in some cases, and I think that our society, the modern world wants things a little bit more. They want a little more on their design. So I think it kind of gets a bad rep there. And I got to say, Matt dove into it a little bit, but again, talk to that PR agent, because brutalism is a terrible word. I mean, it just doesn't sound nice. It sounds like if architecture was a physical injury, it would be called brutalism, right? It does come from that word. I mean, yes, I agree, Matt. There's a little bit of up in the airness about the actual term's history, but I saw several words where it referred to the French word brute, meaning raw, and I think it's an apt description, but maybe if it was like rawulism or something, we get a little more support behind it. I don't know. Okay, maybe not so much that. But I just think that there's some things going against it like that, which prevent people from seeing the actual benefits of brutalism, which there are, and we'll get into those specifics once we start voting. We talk about the actual design principles. There's a lot of advantages with materials and with design and time, energy, that sort of thing, that are overshadowed by things like the name. And I just got to be honest with you. I started thinking about, brutalist buildings that I had seen in the past and where I can pick out brutalist design from. And the biggest problem that I had as I was running through that is a lot of the times that I could think of brutalist buildings, they were like in these post-apocalyptic movies or Big Brother type movies where the government had taken over, and like, man, that's not fair. You took what would have been a cool looking building and you put the governor of the world up there, and now everybody thinks that brutalism is for like the creeps who take over the world. So definitely not fair. Brutalism has a bad rep, and it's an image problem. It's not a problem with the style itself.
Whew. Okay. thoughtful response is unfair, he says.
Unfair.
If it was a different name, everyone would
probably
universally love it.
If it was called like Happy Fun Time Architectural Style, it would be everywhere.
That sounds like something that Brutalism would try to rebrand itself as. Dystopian.
You need a new image.
I did actually see some people trying to rename it Heroic Architecture. Because at the time, there was also people who were trying to get that name to stick. Because, Brutalism is more of like they adopted the term and used it against the people who originally came up with it.
Right.
Anyways, no. None of that's true, and none of it's good. And so that's what I'm going to tell you about right now. So why is Brutalism not good design? Folks, I had the same feeling when I first heard that I was going to be talking about Brutalism, probably as you do when you experience a brutalist architectural design. It's brutal. It is brutal out there. And it's not only the structure that's brutal, it's the feeling you get in your gut. It sucks your soul out. You feel bullied by these buildings. You feel oppressed by their form. You feel depressed by their form, heck. And they focus, so what Aaron said, oh, look, they have this honesty in materials, right? Okay, they're so honest, they're such a great design. But that is only focusing on one aspect of architectural design, completely disregarding the other. It's like when you create a video game, or when you create a character in a video game, and you max out one stat all the way, right? Spend all your points toward that stat, and you're not spending anything else. You should realize that there's going to be negatives to doing that. Sure, it might be good in one specific aspect, but that doesn't mean it's good all around. And I think that because they're only maxing out this honesty and materials thing, they don't care about comfort. They don't care about beauty at all. And I think the windows in this building just look like a punctured afterthought. There's no thought for light. There's no thought for anything else besides, look at the formwork imprint, like, wow, how truthful. It's not there. The architects that were exercising this style, we're not thinking about the people that were going to be in these spaces or the communities that are going to be built in. They were focusing on having a distinct style, and they wanted to be, okay, this is, uniquely British, and we are focusing on what's distinct about this particular structure, not the context in which it's being built and the experience that people are going to have in it. I mean, just watch some interviews with the Smithsons. They'll talk about shutting out the surrounding environment and making sure that they put up these walls. It looks like a prison, folks. It's a claustrophobic experience to be in any of these kind of buildings. And like Aaron mentioned, there's a reason. It's not unfair that dystopian movies and stuff have these architectures in. There's a reason why. It's because they had this idea of this socialist utopian society, but the reality is the exact opposite. It's crumbling infrastructure, it's urban decay, it's like horrible looking oppressive urbanization and modernization. That's a dystopia, folks, and that's the reason why they're in those movies. This kind of style is hideous. It is inhuman. It's against nature. It's against humankind.
Objection, hearsay.
This is not necessarily the opinion of anybody but me, but that's what I think, and I'll leave you with this. Look, these buildings were intended for common people to use, but they're so unpopular with the general public. I point you towards a 2005 British television show called Demolition, where people voted for 12 buildings that they called the Dirty Dozen that they wanted to see demolished in Britain. How many of those do you think were brutalist? 8. 8 out of 12. This is the majority of buildings people hate in their cities that they see every day are brutalist, and there's a good reason for that. It's because there's not good design, and frankly, I think we just need to be done with it and forget about it, and it's just terrible design through and through. That's my argument. Thank you very much for listening.
Wow. So the bulk of your argument seems to come down to Matt doesn't like it, so you should vote against it. Is that
No, it's social proof.
through-
I'm bringing up a lot of different things. Not only that I don't like it, but this is what I'm echoing what everyone in the chat is thinking. Everyone listening to this in the future is thinking when they see or walk past one of these buildings.
I don't think the people in the chat are that close-minded. I mean, right, guys? I mean, you guys are open to... You can think for yourself. Matt doesn't have to tell you what you think. That's
No, you can definitely think for yourselves, but I'm just giving you an opportunity. Look how much history I gave you up top to make your own decision about this. And I think when it comes down to it, objectively, just the experience of being outside these buildings, being inside these buildings, is just a bad time. And there's a reason why nobody likes them. You even said architects don't like them because they're so focused on one thing, they're not even considering other.
Well, look, let's just be honest. When push comes to shove, and you have form versus function, and your whole being is making that form as good as possible. When function trumps it, you're probably going to push back on it. That's what I was trying to say. Is that some people just don't like it because it doesn't include what they want to put in the building, and I think that's what happens with a lot of these buildings. Is people say, "Well, yeah, it does everything it's supposed to do, but I want it to do more," and they're mad at it for not doing that.
There's more to good design than just single-minded, just doing one thing and then completely blocking out everything else, all other. Like if you look at a design brief and only have one way of approaching it, then that's not good design. Sorry.
Well, I guess that's what we're going to find out right now.
Ugly, says Randy. I totally agree. Yes, so we can get into the voting portion. Yes, so of course, we have the polls pop up at the bottom. If you're in the live audience, if you're listening later, you got to join live if you're going to vote and cast your opinions on how you feel about our specific topic. So we'll go through our 5 principles of design. We'll debate once at a time as you vote. And the first one we're going to talk about is brutalism useful? And Aaron, you're going to go first.
All right. Just like I topped off my introduction, it is, in some cases you might say only useful. It is existing to be a structure and nothing more. That's kind of what brutalism does. Strip it all down to just what you need. What do I need to make this building keep the elements out, keep the people inside? That's it. That's all there is. So if nothing else, brutalism is useful. And I really don't know how you could argue against that, because usefulness doesn't have anything to do with how it looks. It doesn't have to do with coziness. It doesn't have to do with anything else. Useful is this element, is this item fulfilling its need? The need to be a building, and that's what brutalism does. Brutalist buildings are useful, if absolutely nothing else.
But it's not, the usefulness doesn't come of just having walls and a ceiling. That's not all a structure is supposed to be. It's supposed to be for living. It's supposed to be for working. Structural concrete is a bad insulator. So if you don't put any interior stuff on it, that's bad. The exteriors are decayed and crumbling because of the elements on there. That's bad usefulness for the exterior. This is one thing we didn't really touch on, but there's this idea in brutalism of separating function in defined blocks within the building, and that implies more bureaucracy and siloed thinking, which is against what you should be going for, equality in this institutional settings that a lot of these buildings were designed in. So the usefulness, frankly, is just not there, aside from, it stops the rain from hitting you on the head, but it doesn't do anything outside of that, and architecture should be more than just protection from the elements.
Well, it looks like you, our audience, have voted, and brutalism gets 1 out of 1 donut thus far.
Wow, perfect score. Bowling a perfect game.
And thank you for joining us, guys. We're going to wrap it here. We don't have time to keep going.
Oh, boy.
All right. Up next, we are going to pick up design principle number 2. Does brutalism have aesthetic appeal? And this time, Matt's going to take it first. Go for it, Matt.
If you've ever seen or been in these buildings, you know the answer is no. Mr. Rainer Banham, in his article defining what brutalism was, said it is, quote, anti-beauty in the classical aesthetic sense of the word. He's literally saying it's anti-aesthetic. That's part of the design is disregarding aesthetics. Anything after raw materials is a complete afterthought. Think about things you have to take in mind when you're creating an architectural piece. Place, rhythm, light, beauty, aesthetics. All of this is completely disregarded for materials, and the materials also on the aesthetics on the exterior have horrible water stains, moss and lichens, rust stains from the steel reinforcements. That makes them anti-aesthetic, non-aesthetic, so they're not aesthetic.
I just gonna pick that up and say water, moss, that sounds like nature. That sounds like beauty embodied right there. And I mean, anybody who's going to go up and say, oh, well, this isn't attractive, this isn't beautiful, that's closed-minded thinking. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, everybody. I mean, you can look at something and find beauty in a rock. If you can find beauty in a rock, you can find a beauty in a brutalist building. There's beauty in simplicity.
No, unfortunately, that is not the case here today. Aesthetics are not relative, and no donut for aesthetic. Sorry about that.
I'm not gonna push back too hard on that one. Every time we do this, you guys, and we've talked about this several times. There's usually one argument where Matt or I are like, I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes you're
that's a rough one. That's a rough
from
one.
behind, but not so on the next one, which is about simplicity, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so the next one is brutalism simple? And Aaron, you're going to start.
All right. Again, kind of like useful, this is in the definition of brutalism. They are simple, stripped-down design. This is everything you need, nothing you don't. I mean, that's the reason they use things like concrete, is because concrete can be just a concrete wall. You don't need anything else. You don't need siding and flare pieces and nothing else. It is just what has to be there. It is simple. It is walls. A lot of times these are just like Matt said, brick, concrete walls, maybe a little bit of steel in there. There's not a whole lot of finish on the inside. Like I said, the ductwork is there, and it is where it has to be, and we don't have to do anything to cover it up, hide it. It is the simplified version of a structure. It is just what needs to be there, and it is nothing else.
But I think being like I said, single-minded just about the materials is not what simple design is. So like Le Corbusier's rooftop garden in Marseille, sure, this is simple in the fact that it's just a flat concrete open area with like some concrete weird shapes stuck around there, but it's not a garden. It's not a simple design. A design should take into account the people who are going to use the space, and nobody wants to just be looking at a plain concrete wall all day and sitting in a concrete wall all day. So I think it's not simple because no, it's not taking into account other things that you should in a design in order to make it simple.
Well, I'm afraid our audience disagrees, and they think that brutalism is, in fact, simple.
Okay, whatever you say.
All right, this brings us to our fourth design principle. Is this design environmentally friendly? Matt, you're going to take it first.
Okay, so I have a stat here, everybody. Listen up. National Academy of Sciences research article from 2019. Quote, cement production is currently the largest single industrial emitter of CO2, accounting for about 8%, almost 3 billion tons annually of global CO2 emissions. Do not make any more of these buildings, folks. The only reason not to tear down every single brutalist building that's already out there, these concrete monstrosities that are oppressing you every single day, is the carbon sequestered within. The architects did not take this into account when they were designing the buildings. So they only thought, this is cheap and this fits my idea of what brutalism is, whatever. So no, it's not environmentally friendly in the slightest. What do you think?
I think we're not talking about history. We're not talking about fabricating them now. We're talking about the design of brutalist buildings. And the fact is that materials they use, concrete, when it comes to actually existing, is the most natural of designed building materials. It is not just renewable, it exists. I mean, concrete made from rocks, and it's just the stuff that's already there. You don't have to go cut down a growing tree and wait 100 years for it to come back. Concrete is rock. Rock is ground up. It still is what it is. It doesn't change. So the quote that I read was, concrete is the most natural of materials regarding environmental impact. So, I mean, that's a hard one to push back on. I'd say it is.
Okay. Oh, wow. 11th hour. You got the vote for yes. Push you over the edge. Okay, folks.
Squeak.
This is beginning to be a joke here. Okay, so yes, it did get the donut for environmentally friendly. That's fine. Okay. And as Ansi points out, not all brutalism is about concrete, although a lot of the buildings are concrete, but there's also wood, metal, glass. It's really just being truthful about the materials, showing them openly and not covering them up is what brutalism is all about. But they are, in my opinion, of course, the majority, whatever they're made of, is not environmentally friendly. So you guys are wrong. Anyways, please stay with me here on the very last one, which is the donut for honesty. So, Aaron, is brutalism honest?
Well, I don't want to call you out, Matt, but you literally just said that brutalism's all about being the material that it's being made of. And I mean, it is. We talked about this. The pipes, air ducts, whatever inside, they're just put in and they're left there. There is no paint on the outside. There's no, I mean, a lot of times the materials, yes, they're a lot of concrete, but there is metal, there's wood, there's glass, absolutely. But it goes through very little, if any, finish. So it is just put in the way it is and lets it exist exactly how it is. And I'd say it's one of the most honest ways you can use a material is by letting it be what it is and presenting it as it exists and not covering it up or changing it. So I would say, of course, yes, very, very honest.
Sure, honesty in materials, like the steel reinforcements that are within the concrete in every single brutalist building. Where are those? Pencil drop, because they're not there. They're hidden inside. This is dishonesty. It's not just a concrete block. There is steel, and you can see that unintentionally because of how much rust and stuff it happens when there's any kind of moisture around these buildings. There's a reason why they look so bad, is because they age so ungracefully. But they're not. You can say they're honest, but like I said, they're just covering up all the steel that's actually in there. So that's dishonest, frankly. You're talking about how honest you are about materials. You're not even showing that. So it's just very unhonest, the opposite of honest, which is dishonest, which is the vote that we're doing right now. Don't forget to vote. All right, stalling. It's not doing it for me here. So that's going to be a yes.
I don't know where I'm gonna put this. This will be on a t-shirt, but concrete reinforcement is dishonesty. Matt Robinson. There we go.
Where's the steel? Show me the rebar.
See, what we need is some clear concrete so Matt can get a good look at that reinforcement on the inside.
Hey, just show me, man. Okay, so that gives brutalism, after our vote here today by our audience, 4 donuts out of 5. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to the Smithsons, Mr. Banham, and everyone who enjoys rigid, oppressive, bullying structures.
Well, let's hear it for graceful losers first and foremost. I mean, that's...
No, it was a good debate. Yeah.
That was good.
And before we leave to you today, one last thing we want to point you towards is that there is a conference in September of this year, the end of September, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, called 3D Basecamp, which we're talking about 3D modeling. We're talking a lot about architecture, and it's going to be a great show to meet people who are also interested in architecture and all kinds of design. So check it out. It's 3dbasecamp.sketchup.com is the place to go to get all the information you need about 3D Basecamp.
It's going to be great. We'll be there. Actually, what we've talked about is doing a live version of this show at Basecamp. So if you come, you could vote, by actually raising your hand and getting your vote counted rather than, hitting the button. So.
Ooh, wow. That sounds like worth the price of the ticket right there.
Right there. Get yourself literally counted. That's right.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Yeah, we'd love to see you there. But thanks. I think outside of anything else, thank you for bringing your good arguments today. Thank you, everybody in the chat, for coming and voting. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
This has been a Trimble Media production. Thanks for listening to Donuts, Design, and Debate. If you have an opinion about our topic today, or if you have an idea for a future debate, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at donuts@trimble.com. Hey, and if you know a Brutalism stan who you think would enjoy this show, go ahead and share this episode with them. Thanks again for tuning in, and take care.